second in leadership in the United Arab Emirates. And so then, with the UAE, they were very eager. Their ambassador in Washington is just terrific. He is a friend of our country. He understands democracy. He understands the importance of economic viability. And then we approached Bahrain. And Bahrain, you couldn't just approach a country and say, oh, well, my name is Kelly Craft, your name is, you have to have a history with them, a little bit of longevity with conversation. So with Bahrain, you would find specific areas that you knew would interest them to have normalization with Israel. So you fast forward and you look at when President Trump came into office the first time. We didn't have that opportunity to have peace and stability in the Middle East. And let me just say why that is so important today. So when Hamas attacked Israel on that October 7th day, and then you fast forward, and as Israel is in this, rightfully so, this mission to take down every bit of the Hamas leadership, you look at the way the United States came in. You look at what they did with Iran. And the reason that's so important is Iran has proxies, and those proxies are Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis from Yemen, and all of these Islamic terrorists. So why is that important? The countries in the Abraham Accords understood the importance of additional security and stability in the Middle East, and they knew that by weakening Iran, that was going to make a safer, more viable Middle East. Normally, they probably would have condemned the American attack, the Midnight operation, the most incredible attack that we were able to basically weaken the nuclear capabilities of Iran. Instead, they remained silent. I would have much rather them been that way than all of the Middle East to have been on Iran's side, which could have easily happened. But instead, we saw this camaraderie, and everybody there probably collectively exhaled to say, we are a safer Middle East because of Iran's nuclear capabilities being lessened, and the terror groups, their proxies, almost nearly wiped out. If you think about Hezbollah, and you think about the Houthis, and you think about the Islamic terrorists, but what do we have left? We have Hamas, and that is why it is so vitally important that we take out the disruptor in the Middle East.
So what about the recent bombing in Qatar, which I know they were trying to get to Hamas? Is that going to stir up a hornet's nest, or do you think everybody's going to be like, well, it kind of makes sense?
Well, while I'm not in the current administration, so I'm not speaking on behalf of the current administration, I can tell you that from reading and researching and making phone calls, they were alerted, the Qataris were alerted, and were able to move their citizens for safety. They understand, we all know that Hamas's headquarters is in Qatar. We also understand that the Qataris have a really important place with helping us negotiate the ceasefire agreement, and more importantly, bringing these hostages home, right, to the families. And if not for the Qataris allowing the countries, especially with the U.S. and with Israel and other countries that are now engaged in helping us negotiate, the Qataris are our main country that really have the open dialogue with the Hamas leadership. Was it right to take out the Hamas leadership? My opinion, absolutely so. They just happened to be in Qatar. And until every last leader in this Hamas leadership lineage is taken out, the Middle East will never be a safer place, and Israel will definitely, because this will happen again if Hamas has anyone left in the leadership capacity.
Yeah, I saw something today. One guy claimed they're going to need to do it again, in fact. So that's pretty scary.
Well, I think if you look at what happened 2 days ago with the shooting on the bus in Jerusalem, they are very much still engaged in causing, in killing people. And we have to take out, and if you depend upon the United Nations, this is a body that was formed 80 years ago on peace and international security. And this is a body that votes against Israel every moment, every opportunity they can. This is a body that voted against the recent organization that Israel formed for humanitarian aid for the Gazan refugees. They voted against this. Israel continued and went forward, and they are able to get most of the aid through the Palestinian, through the country, because the Hamas leadership, what they do is they intercept the aid and they sell it on the black market, so it never reaches the refugees. And furthermore, I'm going to have to just kind of tell on the countries that are surrounding the Palestinian Authority in Israel. Egypt and Jordan, King Abdullah has refused to take in the Gazan refugees. Egypt, al-Sisi is not taking in the refugees. So it is up to us. It is up to us to make certain that we support Israel in their supporting the refugees with their humanitarian aid, with this group that they formed. And trust me, nothing's perfect. As long as you have rogue leadership, you will never be able to make certain that you're securing the aid to the right people.
So I understand you've been banned from China. I think I might have been. I've been over there talking about free markets, so I don't think I can go back either, but I'm not sure. I haven't been arrested yet. But it's because of your support
if you were arrested, it might,
yeah, I've been
you
taken
would
off the street
definitely,
here.
I might have to be called in to try to come get you.
But you've acknowledged your support for Taiwan, and because of its democratic example, and because of that China's also wanted to sanction you, and so we've got these tensions between Washington and Beijing, and a lot of it has to do with Taiwan or just the Southeast Asia area. And so I guess I want to know how we should diplomatically handle this as the U.S. to keep global security. We don't want to have any wars or anything, but how do we keep Taiwan safe from China and the Southeast Asian area, because China seems to want to take it all over? And then how does that relate to what's going on in Russia and Ukraine?
Well, I think we need to go back. Let's go back to when former President Biden, pulled out of Afghanistan. You all remember that. When we went into Afghanistan, NATO used Article 5 of the NATO Charter, which says if one of the NATO countries is attacked, then the other countries would go in and defend. Well, everyone went into Afghanistan because that is where the main culprits from 9/11, right? President Biden pulled out of Afghanistan without consulting with the other NATO countries, just left them. So what's happening about that time, Steve? Putin's watching. So he's watching. The whole world is looking at the United States and saying, what the heck? We've left these NATO countries high and dry. If you probably saw all of the media on these refugees, these Afghanistan individuals, really smart people being left behind. Translators that without them, our government, our military would not have been safe. They were left behind. So Putin is watching this division, and he thinks now is the right time, perfect timing, to invade Ukraine. So he's invaded Ukraine. So who do you think now is watching to see how America reacts? Xi Jinping. So he has been watching very carefully to see America's action, to see the NATO countries, especially after we were somewhat divided over Afghanistan. And I have to say that President Trump, we have to talk about NATO just for a moment, if you don't mind. In Canada, when I was the ambassador, I started talking about, come on, Canada, let's pay your 2% of NATO, your 2% of your GDP for your defense, for the NATO budget. 2%. They pledged their 2% in 2014. I just spoke there 4 months ago, and I had said the same thing. The new prime minister, he gets it. They are going to be putting forth their 2%, but guess what? Today it's 5%. And most of the NATO countries have followed suit. So you have your 3.5% of the 5% for heavy defense weapons, and you have the 1.5% for infrastructure. So now Canada is just now reaching 2%. But the head of NATO, the president of Finland, said that NATO is stronger than ever because President Trump, who, by the way, started talking about NATO back in 1986 he spoke it on Oprah and he spoke it on Larry King Live, how they got to pay their fair share. So my message is when you are equipped and when your countries are ready and their defense budget is all at that 2%, now 5%, then if you are under attack, you will be more sufficient and you will be able to support your own. And this is a real problem we have because China's watching and they're looking to see, okay, so what's going to happen in the Indo-Pacific? President Trump has got the Atlanta Alliance paying their 5%, most of them getting to that 5%. And my message to Taiwan, you all need to be the Poland of the Pacific. You all need to get your 5%. You need to just get to your 2%. Because China is spending billions, I think around $700 billion on their defense. All the countries in the Indo-Pacific combined are not anywhere near that. And so when I speak with the Taiwanese, I am very close. I am sanctioned by China. I will tell you that I received a phone call literally the minute Joe Biden took the oath of office. Secretary Pompeo and myself both received phone calls, and we are sanctioned not only from China, but we will ever be welcome to Hong Kong or Macau. And with us, it extended on to family members that are not yet born for the rest of our lives. And you know what that did? That made me know that I was doing the right thing by the Taiwanese. Because, first of all, they've got to look within. And in full disclosure, I had a conversation with their vice president, who, by the way, was the ambassador from Taiwan to Washington, D.C., Ambassador Sao. And she is a rock star. And just to talk to her and to say, you know, the problem is really within. You need to make certain that you build this narrative, you articulate the importance of democracy and that every single young adult has a choice every single morning. I'm going to fight for the democracy. And I was just in Australia 2 weeks ago, and I was at breakfast, and two young men, they were bankers from Taiwan, sat to my left. And we had this conversation, and they asked me what I was doing there, and I said, I'm speaking on AUKUS, which is the Australian, UK, US nuclear-powered submarine pact that we have formed. And they said, why are you doing this? And I said, well, you know, because I'm fighting for democracy for Taiwan. Now, this is no joke. And if my chief of staff hadn't been sitting there, neither one of us would have believed the other one. This young man looked at me and said, what is democracy? Well, that's the problem. That's the problem. He's only known to be free. He's only known freedom. He was born with freedom. So with Taiwan, they got to look within and help themselves first because China's watching. And, you know, in Australia, my main reason for traveling there was to go and to stress, it was their Defence Week in Perth for the Australian Defence Week. And within that Defence Week, we spoke about the nuclear-powered submarines and the importance of AUKUS, this agreement between the three countries, and the importance of all the countries paying their fair share, just like the NATO countries, because China is watching. They're watching to see our reaction. They're watching to see, well, how strong is AUKUS going to be? How strong, do you know where the Quad is? How strong is the Quad? So you have India, Japan, the US. How strong is the Quad? Are they going to also, and that's more, the Quad is more of an economic group in the Indo-Pacific. But we need to form as many groups as possible, they do, in the Indo-Pacific for deterrence. And that's why the nuclear subs are so important. It shows deterrence. And that's why autonomous vessels are so important. It shows deterrence. And if there is one thing that's come out of the Ukraine aid that a lot of people have questioned, I get this question all the time, why is it our American tax dollars are going to Ukraine? Well, guess what? Most of it's staying in our country, building up our manufacturing that basically had been shut down because we've had no reason to start building tanks. We've had no reason to increase our drone manufacturing. We certainly haven't had any reason, and we should, for our shipbuilding, for our munitions. So most of that aid has stayed and helped different states, whether it's Michigan, Ohio, Alabama, Florida has a big drone manufacturing. It stayed to help us improve upon our manufacturing, to employ people, to be ready if, in fact, we will have to engage and assist Taiwan in protecting the Indo-Pacific. And that's the importance. And I just can't stress enough that we will be there, but they have to show us first that they're willing to put forth what it takes to defend themselves. And that was my message to the Australians. And you know what, Steve, I arrived in Australia, and I arrived to the news in the Australian, which is their equivalent paper, to the New York Times, that they had revoked an Israeli politician of their Knesset, of the Israeli Knesset. They had revoked his visa to come speak in Australia after they'd already given him his visa. Now, they have given visas to everybody speaking anti-Semitic rallies. So I just called the editor of the Australian, and I just started writing this. I was just writing away, and they published it. And I was really certain that my visa was going to be revoked and I was going to have to go home. But they put it in not only the front page, the second page, but the opinion page. So you see this everywhere. And you know what? You know what I said? The deputy foreign minister, I had a conversation with him. I said, how can you expect the United States to feel confident in knowing if you all are taking the visas of Israeli elected members, allowing visas of people speaking anti-Semitism, knowing that Iran for the last 2 years has been planning attacks, and by the way, they haven't even declared the IRGC as a terrorist group. They know all this. I said, how do you think we could trust building a nuclear-powered submarine that the Iranians won't come in and attack it? Or that someone who is anti-American because of our stance with Israel will not come in and attack the shipbuilding that is in Australia. So, you know, it is so important that America is the global power. And you know, I've told these countries before President Trump was reelected, you better buckle up because he's coming back. And we're taking America back because each of you with your tax-paying dollars deserve to have America back, deserve to be the superpower. Because every day that we are strong is another day that we can de-escalate. Because President Trump does not believe in retreating. We want the other countries, our enemies, to retreat. No, we're back, and we're back very strong. And we will be very strong in the Indo-Pacific because we've got to protect our interest. We will be very strong in the Atlantic, in the alliance. You know, we've got to be stronger in understanding how China and Russia are using, and I really can't stand this term, the global south, because I have such a respect and affinity for the African continent. And we need to really get out there and articulate the importance of understanding China's predatory lending to the countries in Africa. That Russia's sending in their mercenaries, not because they're protecting these capitals of these different states, but because they eventually want to be able to topple over governments. So that's why it's so important to show strength. And that's why it is so important. And people say, well, why is President Trump, he's just like going through this just so quickly? Why? Because I sat back and I watched the last 4 years. I've watched us being the laughing stock of the world. Well, no more. And he knows that every single day matters. It matters for each of you. It matters so that each of you will have an opportunity to be diplomats and to be respected, because we are back.
So you said the Australian was like the New York Times, but they published your article, so they were
They
not
did,
like the
but
New
you know
York
what?
Times.
The Australian is owned by the Murdoch family.
Okay, there you go.
And Lachlan Murdoch, who is the eldest son, is now the owner, chairman
Right.
of this conglomerate. So they were, to my surprise, I actually really did think, especially after the deputy prime minister called me in for a meeting, I said, well, they're going to revoke my visa. So I was really ready to go back. At least I'd already spoken about the submarines.
Yeah,
So.
that's great. I'm going to do a little plug. When we were getting people out of Afghanistan, it's a big article in the Wall Street Journal, and this guy used to be in the armed services, and he was helping get everybody out. Mm-hmm. He was an MBA grad from here.
Wow.
It was so cool. I cannot remember
Wow.
his name. I'm kicking myself, but it was really cool that he did that.
And to think that the men and women, some of their smartest engineers, their smartest translators, had our backs, and most of them did not.
I know.
They got left.
Yeah, it's very sad. I didn't have this on the list of questions I sent you, but we were
Goodness,
talking
okay.
about poverty and poverty in Africa, and it's an issue. And I know you're interested in the area of poverty, or maybe wealth creation is a better term. But what's being done in what's being done in Africa that's working? Is there anything?
Well, what we have to really remember is China has the Belt and Road. And what they do with the Belt and Road is it's nothing more than predatory lending. So they'll go into South Sudan, and they're going to say to President Kidd or Vice President Machar, they're going to say, you know what, we're going to build you the shiniest stadium with your name on it, but yet we're going to bring our prisoners over, and we're going to be doing the building with our prisoners, and we're not going to teach you any economic viability, and we're going to leave you, and yet that building's going to crumble in about 4 years, but we own you now because we built your building. So instead of teaching, instead of leaving them with skilled workers, they take everything with them. So the way I look at Africa is I think the United States needs to be more engaged. We all need to be aware that there are some of the smartest, brightest young individuals. Some of the countries are just on the tipping point of becoming democracies. And when they are a democracy and they have rule of law, it is amazing what these young adults can accomplish and what they are allowed to accomplish. So I will forever, and I must say that one of my ambassadors is here, Jennifer Barber. She was my ambassador for this social economic, and she was so instrumental in making certain that women's rights in Africa, women's rights in some of these countries where the girls are not allowed to go to school, she would come to me and say, you know what, they're still not doing it. We've got to check up. We've got to go check up on them. And you don't think I wouldn't make a phone call really fast. But let me tell you who was going behind me. Every time we would come upon a problem and we would go to these countries, China, literally you could see them behind the shoulder of a country saying, you know, if you agree with the United States, we're going to take away this humongous bridge that we're building right now, or this waterway that we are constructing for you to have clean water. So every day we were up against the Chinese Communist Party trying to take over at the UN, which they are, by the way. But I really encourage you to read and become so knowledgeable on Africa, because the Global South is a place where they all just want a chance. And the countries, the Kenya, the countries that are democracy, look at what they're doing. You know, they're sitting on rare earth minerals. They could be so instrumental in helping us decouple from China and helping us with Taiwan. But no, they can't recognize Taiwan. Why? Because China threatens them. So for me, poverty is less about wealth creation, because you can't create wealth unless you've taught someone societal norms. And we had this conversation. You know, my husband and I truly believe that when we help people, to me, it's an insult to throw money unless you have given people responsibility. I've got 12 grandkids, and let me tell you what, they can waste money so fast. And, you know, we have to put them on a budget, and they don't like it. My grandson's in college, and he absolutely cannot understand why he is on a budget. Well, if you go down your expense list and you see what they're spending it on, you can understand why you're on a budget. So it's no different. I mean, you got to teach people how to appreciate the dollar, what it takes to work, give them skills. We're firm believers in technical schools. I mean, this is going to be the future. And, you know, if you want to talk about climate change, the reason that we were able to industrialize was because of the fossil fuel industry for America. Let's give Africa a chance. Let's allow them to have light, electricity, power, clean water. All of this is brought to you by fossil fuels and oil and gas, and in areas where it can be done, solar. But they're sitting on mines of lithium, mines of cobalt, of all of a plethora of minerals, almost the periodic table. They just need to be tapped into.
So we still have some time, but I'm going to jump to this question. What advice would you give young people here who aspire to enter diplomacy, public service, government, leadership roles, about navigating challenges and staying true to their values?
Embrace your mistakes. Welcome your mistakes. Welcome them. Learn from them. I made a lot of mistakes. I still do. I ask for help. I don't depend upon social media for any information. I read about 4 hours a day, if not more. And I know what I don't understand and what I don't know, and it's a lot. So I will pick up the phone and call someone that's smarter than me, that knows more than I do, and they are honored to be able to help you. And get engaged. Be engaged today. And how do you become engaged? Is you become well-informed. And you're well-informed because you read and you seek out those who know more than you do. And you know, when I was serving our country and President Trump, I think people tend to forget, I wasn't serving Kelly Craft. I was serving our country, and I was serving President Trump. And no matter who you're serving, remember, you are serving that leader's policies. And if you disagree respectfully, disagree quietly, resign. Don't write a tell-all book. Don't go out and just spread rumors and lies. That's what's wrong with this society. Media loves that kind of stuff. Resign, and you know what? Just be thankful that you were able to have the privilege to represent the finest country in the world. And the only way that we're going to have diplomats, to each of you sitting in this room, is that each of you remain curious, make mistakes. I'm going to share with you, if that's okay, a mistake I made. And this was a mistake I made just 6 years ago. So right now we're going into the UN General Assembly. It's UNGA. It's their most important 2 weeks. Jennifer, you remember this. Everybody wants to meet with the President of the United States. Every country, all 192 member states, minus maybe 2 or 3 that are rogue, that are dangerous. And so when they meet with the U.S. president, the U.S. president always sits here, my seat. The leader of another country sits there. And so the way this is done is that I would sit to the left of the president and then the Secretary of State and on. And then if the vice president was there, obviously he would always sit first seat. And let me tell you what, I thought that was the greatest thing ever, being seated right there. I was so proud until I realized I didn't know the answer to something. So we had just had a meeting with the president of Turkey, with Erdogan. And Erdogan was asking for some specific things. He was inquiring on some fighter jets. And I'm just listening, and we're talking about the fighter jets, and of course that's going to be part of the Treasury, and that's part of obviously making certain that that does not interfere with our national security. And so you fast forward, our next meeting is with Egypt. And so Al-Sisi sits down, the president sits down, we took a little break, we're all sitting down, and Al-Sisi remember the president of the United States, he becomes not just the president, you all, but he's a psychologist, he's a therapist, he's putting out, spats between countries. I don't like so-and-so, they don't like me. Well, this was one of those moments. So Egypt, if you've all read just recently, and let me tell you, I know this term backwards and forwards now. Egypt is very concerned about the GERD. Does anyone in here know what the GERD is? Yes. Oh my gosh, I wish I'd have had you seated right next to me. So you know the GERD, they just completed Ethiopia, right? Which will allow Ethiopia the more plentiful water supplies because their country dries up very quickly. Well, Egypt, who is downstream, is very concerned about not having enough water because the dam could easily, they think, block. So Egypt is sitting there, President Trump is sitting here, and he brings up the GERD. Well, remember, we just had this meeting about these F-35s, and I'm thinking, oh, yeah, I know that's an F-35. So I could tell probably that the president really wasn't that familiarized with what the GERD was either. So he kind of looks over at me and says, the ambassador here, she'll take care of it after this meeting. And I'm going, oh, my God, I have no idea what that is. No idea. And everyone around me knew I had no idea. So you better believe that I went back to the ambassador's residence. My chief of staff met me, and we studied for 2 hours because I knew that Al-Sisi was very serious, as you know from reading the recent news on the completion of the Grand Renaissance Ethiopian Dam, the GERD, the Grand Ethiopian. I knew it backwards and forwards. So when I met with President Al-Sisi, I was a pro. But if I'd had you, I wouldn't have looked, I had this big blank on my face. At first I thought, I got this. I can talk about fighter jets all day long. It's far from it.
Wow.
So you know what? I should have been prepared. But I wasn't. Because that big notebook that my team organized for me every day, I'm like, I'm not going to worry about reading about the first meeting, second meeting. I wasn't informed. I wasn't ready. It won't happen again. And I hope that you learn by a mistake like that, because until you do make a mistake, it will happen again. And you won't even know it because you won't correct yourself. So welcome your mistakes.
By the way, we're going to have a political marketing minor here in the College of Business within the next year. So if you're in political science, you should consider it because it's a really good tool to have. And if you're a business major, you want to go into politics or the political arena, it's a good tool to have. So
and I have to say, if I have one regret, which is I have many, but I definitely would have taken history class in college. I would have most definitely taken history of the wars because every conflict in the world has history behind it. So I really encourage you, whether you take it online, and I think the college courses are stellar at teaching history. And that's something we've even lost in our high schools, is just civics. But I really, really encourage you to take a class on history and the history of war to understand the conflicts and what causes them. Because it's not just the battlefield. It's up here and it's in here.
Okay, I think we're just about out of time,
Oh.
so we can open up to Q&A. If you have a question, go up to one of these two microphones, and we'll just go back and forth to take them in order. And please feel free to ask. Go ahead.
Hi. As you may or may not know, Poland recently had a drone incursion by Russia, and they're talking about invoking Article 4. Do you think this was possibly a test of NATO resolve, or do you think it was a mere side effect of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine?
So what is your name?
Andrew Goodwin.
Okay, Andrew. So I think the first time that the Russian drones kind of played on the line there, if you remember, with their drones, I think that was a mistake. My personal opinion, this time, I believe there were too many. Were there 19, I think, is what they said. And NATO is right to research this carefully, to look at all their intelligence carefully, to look at all of their surveillance, especially from their satellites, very carefully, because once NATO invokes Article 5, there is no looking back. I will be disappointed if they do not stand firm and make it very known to Putin that was an invasion, and we're not moving the line. And if you cross this line and you hurt one of our civilians, you will have repercussions. So I haven't read the latest in the last 4 hours on, of course it's nighttime there, but I think that once they get their surveillance and their intelligence, that'll be able to tell us, I feel if you've got that many drones over, that wasn't a mistake. But then again, I'm not the US government, I'm not the intelligence, and I'm certainly not the other governments. But I would hope that NATO would stand firm, because what does that tell us if they don't? So that's a great question, Andrew, because if they don't, then what does that tell Putin? What does that tell Xi Jinping? Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Renelda, and I'm studying marketing here. My question for you is, what does the future of diplomacy look like for me as a young adult who's interested in government, and maybe even like in countries like Haiti, how we can rebuild even their government or use the resources that they're also sitting on, and how we can improve? Like, I know they don't have their president still from the assassination, but what does that future look like for us if we want to be involved, or should we just focus on serving America and like building our own resources and peace with other countries instead?
You know, you raised very good issues. I want to tell you that Moise, the president of Haiti, was my friend. And I met with him in his home. They had to move our meetings several times for security reasons. And our meeting was actually cut short because word was out that I was in Port-au-Prince, and they were going to block the runway. So as I was rushed out of the residence, they were throwing bricks, burning towers. I mean, it is so true what you see. It's out of control. But until we teach their military how to protect themselves and the Haitians, the innocent people, against these gangs, I know that the Kenyans have done a great job in bringing in their military, but you have to have a special training when you're up against gangs. And then back to your diplomacy. You are a diplomat now. First of all, you're representing the state of Kentucky. You're representing your university. And yes, when you work on diplomacy within your own country or within your own state, that is when you will have knowledge. Like I said, you've got to have the history, you've got to have the knowledge, you've got to have the depth. And if you want to go into diplomacy, it's not just about an ambassador, it's about going into a think tank. It's about joining organizations that require you to think, to read, to assess, to ask a lot of questions. And I really encourage you, the number one thing for me is reading. and asking questions. Surround yourself with people. You have the smartest and brightest professors. Use them. This is the only time in your life that you can actually use them. Knock on their door because they are waiting for someone to ask a question. And if you know, they don't like when I do this, but anyone can email me and I'm happy to answer any questions and help you, because I truly believe that diplomacy is no longer the way it once was. That's over. And you all need to understand that we are now on a different level. In this world, China is watching this play out in the world. And so your level of knowledge is going to have to be way up here, but it can't be unless you've been way down here to learn. So my chief of staff can share with you my email, and I'm happy to give you some ideas, but you can start on campus. But I really encourage you to listen and to read. Because do you all know Jordan Peterson? Does everybody know Jordan? So I'm on his board, and he tells students, when you listen very carefully to what someone else is saying, do you know how they know you're listening? By the questions that you ask back. So before you ask the questions, listen. Use the smart and bright people around you. Take advantage of it. You're only in college once. My brother was there 3 times, but once. But you know what I mean? Take advantage of it. And it's okay to make mistakes, because you won't make it again. And you can always reach out to me also. If I don't know the answer, I will find it for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You have a question?
Hello.
Hi.
So,
Your
as
name?
a diplomat, how
name?
do you?
Your name, please?
Oh, my name is Emily. Nice to meet you.
Hi,
My
Emily.
brother went to Craft Academy. Thank you very much. for doing
Fantastic.
that.
What's your brother's name?
Kyle Reed. He just graduated as an engineer here.
Oh, okay. Fantastic.
Yeah. So, as a diplomat, what is your opinion on trying to balance out previous partnerships and devotion to other countries that have helped you out in the past versus possible negative actions that they are having now? Specifically, I do want to ask this in regards to Israel and the International Association of Genocide Scholars now referring to what they are doing as a genocide. At what point would you draw a line of either now or in the future of what could happen? Is there a line?
Well, I'm not the government. I'm not the U.S. government, and I'm certainly not the Israeli government. And also, I'm not, obviously, the International Court of Justice. I'm not the ICJ or the ICC, so I don't make that decision. But I can tell you from being and sitting behind that placard that says United States of America in the Security Council and listening to disgusting resolutions against Israel, disgusting, every single day. Going to a country that was friendly, Australia, and seeing what they were doing to Jewish students, all of the different rallies, the anti-Semitic rallies, and people that were celebrating Hamas. That is wrong. And let me tell you, the Palestinian people are lovely people. I was the first sitting U.S. ambassador to ever be invited to Bethlehem for Christmas Eve. They are lovely people. They are being used as human shields by Hamas. Their humanitarian aid is being intercepted by Hamas. These hostages have been captured. Families have lost loved ones because of Hamas. And do you know where that all goes back to? Iran. So if you look at, you just have to understand the history. And until we eradicate Hamas and we eradicate this anti-Semitism, we're always going to have these conflicts. People are always going to accuse of genocide. You have to look at the definition of genocide very carefully before you ever make that designation. That is why you don't see that frequently, is you have to look at all of the prerequisites. But I can't answer for the Israeli government because all I know is they're in pain. I was there a couple months after October 7th. I met with the families. I prayed with the families. I just reached out to a family whose son was the last of the 3 to be released alive. Also met with a family whose grandfather was not so lucky. And that is why America has got to stand up and be strong. And you know, there are conflicts all over this world. But as Americans, what we have to show, we cannot retreat from them. We have to show deterrence. So you got to show strength. And if we lose that because we are not willing to stand firm against Hamas and stand firm against the way the Chinese treat the Uyghurs, against Myanmar, against countries that are in Iran that are on the Human Rights Council that are committing atrocities to young adults your age. In Afghanistan, the girls can't even go to school. So I have to be the voice for the people that don't have a voice right now. And I don't have an answer to this where the end is, but I can tell you one thing, the UN is not going to decide on the end of the Israeli-Hamas conflict. The US, everyone needs to understand, Hamas has to be taken out for this to end. So thank you, Emily, and I'll make sure that I look up your brother, because you know they all write letters to us when they graduate.
Oh.
So I'll look up his letter, yes. Yeah, so thank you for that question, and thank you for caring.
Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Salha Shwedi. I wanted to reply to what you just said right now about it not being a genocide.
No, I didn't say it's not a genocide. I
Okay.
said I can't define genocide.
Okay.
Okay.
Then I'll just make note that the International Association of Genocide Scholars recognize what is happening in Gaza as a genocide, and Israel's own human rights group recognize what's happening in Gaza as a genocide. And it's a war crime to kill civilians, even if you are targeting military personnel. It is a war crime to bomb hospitals and schools, and I also wanted to reply to you saying that Hamas is stealing the aid, which it's not backed by any evidence. It is the responsibility of the occupying power to ensure that the imprisoned population is fed and doesn't starve to death. And also, Israel bombed the aid flotilla 2 days ago that was going to provide aid to Gaza. And there are video documentations of the IDF soldiers stomping on the food right outside of the Gaza border.
Well, what I can tell you is the United States, until Germany and Japan surrendered, we did not go in and provide any aid. We waited until they surrendered, and then we went in and we provided aid. Israel has formed their own humanitarian aid group. The reason being, most of the aid, whether it's from the World Food Program, whether it's from any of the UN programs, most of that aid, I think about 90% of it, was being absconded by Hamas and also just gangs. It wasn't reaching the innocent civilians. And until the United States of America acknowledges that there is genocide taking place, my lodestar is going to be what the United States decides. And I can tell you that Hamas is using innocent people as human shields.
There's no proof for that?
There is a lot of proof of that, and I am happy to provide you with a plethora of reading on it, of material other than social media. But you know, I applaud you for standing up, because obviously you have a voice. You have a voice, and you're doing it very diplomatically. And that's what's important, is that this dialogue is about diplomacy, right? And you have a right to your opinion, as do I have to mine, as to everyone in here. And that's why it's so important that we all read and we understand history and have our knowledge, and we seek other people that can answer questions. But I stand firmly with Israel, and I cannot stress that enough. And to also stand with the innocent people in Palestine. And I can't understand for the life of me why Egypt and Jordan, who, by the way, have large Palestinian diasporas, why they are not taking in these Gazan refugees.
Because the Palestinians want to stay in their homeland. It's their rightful land. They don't want to go to another country, and it's not the responsibility of other countries to take them in.
Well, they need to be able to be placed somewhere until wherever they're going to be residing is built back where it's safe for them. Whether their schools, their hospitals, wherever they're going to be, they need to have a way of life, wherever that may be. And we have to depend upon the countries that do have they do have citizens in that country, so they understand the importance. They are the border countries. But at the same, I just want to stress to you, I really appreciate the fact that your mannerism, your articulation, and that you're standing there and that we're having a conversation.
Can I make one last point?
Sure.
Okay. So, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Even if Hamas, which there's no proof, like I said, okay, if they were using people as human shields and hiding under hospitals and under schools, is it right for Israel to bomb a whole hospital and a whole school if, for example, there were terrorists in an American school with children inside, or American hospital with innocent people inside? Would America then go and bomb the entire school or hospital? So would you kill all of those innocent civilians even if you're trying to target Hamas? That isn't the right way to go about it.
You know what, that is not the right way, but that is not the way that it has been gone about. So what normally happens is that the government, the IDF officials will alert individuals within the hospital, as they have done. I went to that hospital in Gaza. I saw, from my very own eyes, the tunnel underneath that hospital. They are given opportunity. They are alerted to the fact that there will be an attack, there will be a bomb, or whatever is going to be happening to that particular area, just like they alerted Qatar. Just like we have alerted Iran or Israel, like they alerted. We did not alert them because they went past their 60 days, Iran did. But just that is protocol, and they have been alerted. Now, whether or not Hamas takes this alert and removes innocent civilians, they are very much aware when it comes to infrastructure areas where there are going to be innocent people, that there is an imminent trouble and danger.
They give them 48 hours to evacuate from those safe zones after they send them the flyers. They tell them to go into the safe zones, and then they bomb the safe zones after. And whenever there's aid distributed, when the people are trying to get some aid, they bomb the places with the aid.
I haven't seen that. What I have seen is I was there when the United States and France and the UK, I watched the aircrafts drop the aid, which was quite magnificent. These boxes look so tiny from the sky, and when they land, they're half this size, full of humanitarian aid, mainly food and medicines. But what you're speaking about, I have not read, and you better believe I will be researching that.
I can provide videos for you.
I am not
multiple
interested
videos
in
of
watching
happening.
videos. I will be reading resources.
Okay.
But thank you for offering.
And we got one over here and then one over there. Let's see what happens. Oh, two more over here.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
okay.
Hello,
Hi.
my name is Shelby. I major in engineering here. My question to you is, while you worked under the Trump administration, do you believe with the current invasion with Poland that has just recently happened, do you believe that Trump and the U.S. will actually stand with NATO and follow through with the article?
Well, we have to remember, we have to obviously have proof that it was not just a mistake or drones that were not properly, what do you call it? Technically supposed to be in that area. So we don't know that. In my opinion, I'm obviously not with the US government. In my opinion, I would think that right now the NATO countries, knowing Mark Rutte, the president of Finland, the head of NATO at the moment, knowing how he feels, I would think that those NATO countries are all discussing, along with their counterpart in the US, all of the intelligence that's been gathered to make certain that before you act, you cannot act unless you have 100% proof. And you know, Poland has been an amazing country, let me tell you. They are the first to step up. They're the first to surpass what we asked for as far as their GDP for their defense budget. And that's a country that I know would be there for us. But the NATO countries, I am certain, are having this in full discussion and looking at all of their sources.
What would be defined as a mistake?
I beg your pardon?
What would be defined as a mistake?
Well, it depends on if how they define the first mistake as far as when the drone, an errant drone, but this was more than one drone, if I understand correctly. This was, I believe, 19, right? So, like I said, I don't have privileged information. I'm not looking at their security, all of the security from the countries, especially the border countries. I know that I believe Finland has closed their airspace right now just to keep things safe because it's on the border of Belarus. So I can assure you that the NATO countries are having conversations. If not this moment, because of the time difference, they have had them and they will continue to have them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mariana.
Hello, my name is Mariana. First of all, thank you so much for coming here and speaking to us. I wanted to ask you a question about the conflict that's happening between Venezuela and the U.S. What exactly is your opinion about that? And I've heard that Maduro has been asking the UN for help. What do you think is going to happen with that?
So my only engagement with Venezuela was at the UN, and that is when the U.S. has designated Guaido as their designated president. Yeah. He wasn't their elected president, but that's who we recognized. And going and visiting Colombia and spending hours on the bridge that connects Venezuela with Colombia and watching, I believe it was about 30,000 refugees a day. Women that were in labor were walking miles to go across the bridge to have their babies in these displacement camps, and the Red Cross and all of the different agencies around the world that are set up right there on the border on the Colombian side. The stories, especially from women and children, the stories of what was happening inside Venezuela and how they were not receiving aid, they were not receiving food, they were being very, very oppressed. The stories were heartbreaking, especially the women who were coming over to give birth and then had to go right back. You know, the fentanyl that is coming across our border is I was there at the border in Yuma, Arizona, I can tell you it's happening. Much less now, but we have to swim upstream, okay? You gotta swim upstream to the source. One of the main sources are the gangs that are coming out of Venezuela, the gangs that are coming out of all of the countries that are providing not just fentanyl. If you look at China, they're providing the ingredients that make fentanyl. We have to eliminate these gangs. And the sad part is a lot of these gangs have now infiltrated into the United States. There are several in Kentucky. So because the drug issue is a very important part to me, because it's going to affect all of you and younger adults that are totally innocent, we have to stop drugs from coming across our southern border and now, as I've said to the Canadians, our northern border. But we have to swim upstream. And if you have to take out a vessel, if you've got to take out a gang, that's what you have to do, because I'm all about protecting you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Rai. I wanted to know how, in your experience advocating on behalf of the U.S., how do you toe the line between aid and respecting autonomy of the country?
So can you elaborate on that a little bit? Are you meaning financial aid, or are you meaning humanitarian? What sort of aid?
Any. Dealers, well, I guess the dealer in this situation would be me, but I would prefer you to interpret that.
In the autonomy of a country, so can you kind of, because obviously if we're sending in aid to a country, we are now understanding the waste and the fraud and the abuse that a lot of this aid has never made it to the recipients, the very people that need it.
This is specifically in reference to your work with the Global South.
Oh,
So how do you navigate your work in providing aid while still respecting the autonomy of whatever country that you're working with?
you know, that is not an easy task, because it depends on the country within Africa. So it depends on what country that is. If it is in a conflict country, then you have to be so careful, because it's intercepted by their rogue governments or by their opposition leaders, a lot of times by the gangs. You look at the Democratic Republic of Congo, none of that aid makes it, mainly because of the gangs. So they intercept. So we have individuals on the ground, so it's called sources, that will report back, that are in the midst of, a lot of times, of when that aid arrives. But I know with the review of USAID, and that's still ongoing, the waste and the fraud of your tax dollars is tremendous.
But you previously said that it was mainly being used stateside. I'm a welder. I work in manufacturing.
Oh, you mean stateside? You're talking about Ukraine. We're going back to Ukraine on that one.
No. I thought that you were making a broad generalization about the aid that we send elsewhere.
No, just to Ukraine. A lot of that
Okay.
financial aid was being spent building up our manufacturing industry for defense manufacturing.
I was going to say, because we've kind of ping-ponged all around the world during this lecture.
That's okay. That's okay.
My question got piqued because you had said that you can't create wealth without teaching them societal norms. So I wanted to better understand what message you were trying to convey with that.
Well, you can't just throw money at people. You can't throw. I'm going to say the financial aid. We're talking about mainly financial humanitarian aid. You can't just throw money at them, because you know what that does in some of the African countries? It puts those people at risk. The fighting that goes on with individuals, with organizations that are receiving this aid, the danger we put them in, no different than when people used to say to me all the time, why does the United States not go in and take out Assad out of Syria? Well, why? Because we don't know if the next person's not worse. And you gotta have the trust of the people. So until we can gather all of our facts and information, it is putting those very people in danger that are receiving some of the aid. And I'm a firm believer that when you provide, and I'm going to talk more about financial aid, okay, you must teach people societal norms. You've got to give them a skill.
Based off of what culture? Because there's a large discrepancy between Eastern and Western, like quote unquote Eastern and Western. Like if you were to go to Japan or anywhere in Europe, it's going to be drastically different from the U.S. So could you clarify that?
So
please?
let's say if we're going into, I'm going to use Africa because that's what I know so well. As far as there is the 1 acre fund. So this is an individual that started this himself, and when you give money to his organization, they will help women purchase a plot of land to grow a crop. When they help them purchase, they're not giving it to them. They're providing a system, like a banking system, that's teaching them responsibility. Now, they may be paying back $1, because that's a lot of money there. But we're teaching them a skill, and I really would encourage you to look, because it is a really cool thing what this young man did himself, and now it's all over Africa, and I'm sure in the Latin America countries also. But I'm a firm believer in, I mean, I find it wrong just to put someone at risk and to give them responsibility of monies when they've never had responsibilities. To me, you're setting them up for failure. And I've seen that in a lot of these countries, that you just throw money after money after money. First of all, most of it doesn't make it there. Second of all, they haven't learned how to be smart, what to do with it, how to invest it. You know, some of these countries, you give it to them because they're going to buy a cow. And that's really important, especially in South Sudan. That's really important. And there are particular agencies that you know when you give that money, that's what's going to happen. So it's really up to the giver to research, and that is something that USAID had not had done thoroughly at all. So it's up to the giver, whether it's I'm giving to whatever organization that my husband and I support, it's up to me to research before, because it's after I've given it, I can't take it back. You know, when you want to teach people skills.
I would like to provide additional context for which I'm asking this question.
Sure.
I recognize that your line of work is drastically different from what I am currently doing and what I'm going to be pursuing, because I'm doing a BA in accountancy.
I'm
and
sorry, in what?
In accountancy, I'm trying to sit for my CPA to become a CFP so that I can help people like me to not have to make the sacrifices that I did because I wanted to be a teacher and not, you know, a welder, right? So
There's nothing wrong with being a welder. We have to have welders.
yeah, but I don't want to do that whenever I'm 60 because I got my first herniated disc at 22. It takes a lot out of you. Everybody loves manufacturing until they actually have to do it. But I digress. I apologize.
That's okay.
To bring it back around, whenever I know that your experience is on a much larger scale, but to be selfish and to say, like, how can I apply your experience and use it to better guide me in what I'm trying to do? How do you provide aid without infantilizing the people that you're trying to provide aid for? Because I feel like that would be a decontextualization of my goal and your experience.
You're exactly right.
And
So we are big believers in providing opportunities. We you know, currently are engaged in a technical school because we have a real shortage, and I understand the labor part of never being a welder, but I can tell you because we visited these schools and we are putting a lot of our own funding into making certain that young adults have a skill. You know, we're building homes in East Kentucky, and do you know what? We can't find electricians. We can't find welders. We can't find HVAC because no one's invested in those young adults. And sometimes they're not young adults, they're people looking for their third job. Everyone is necessary. Everyone. And like I said, there is nothing that makes me feel worse than to throw money at someone. To me, that's degrading. Each person deserves respect and a chance. And if you have the ability to help someone, don't just throw it at them. Help them. To whom much is given, much is expected.
And in this context, helping them would be educating them as opposed to satisfying their material needs in the moment?
Well, you would help them. You would help them to be able to satisfy. And then as you see them work toward a goal where there is additional funding needed, if you're talking about a college education or you're talking about a material for their project, that is something that we look at very closely because we want to help you help yourself. We want every person to be successful. And that's why we have the Craft Academy. and I can assure you that Emily can tell you about her brother, who is now an engineering student here. We believe in the future of every young adult. I believe in you and I don't even know you, but you're here because you care.
I will say I do have a handful of coworkers who were in Desert Storm, and they're probably going to get a kick out of this.
Well, thank you for their service.
Hi, my name's Charles.
Hey, Charles.
I'm a student here, and you talked a little bit earlier about asking for help when you didn't know about the dam in Ethiopia, for example. Was there a time where you had to talk to your predecessor, like Ambassador Haley, or just other people who were in the administration before you about a topic you weren't sure about?
They were on speed dial. I actually had them on speed dial, and I had the president like on the 4th dial. No. And let me tell you who helped me the most. Nikki is a friend of mine. But you know what? I knew what she believed because we both stood up for the president's policies, right? What I needed to know, and let me tell you who helped me so much, was Susan Rice. So Susan Rice was Obama's ambassador to the UN. And when we would go to lunch, and you talk about turning heads in restaurants, because I needed to know, back to my love of the Global South, I needed to know from her, Susan, how do I approach Niger? How do I approach the DRC and the situation with Rwanda? So I kind of went outside the box a little bit and approached it from an angle of, I know what I know and I know what I don't know, and Susan Rice knew everything that I needed to know about what I don't know, and she's wicked smart, and we still keep in touch to this day, as I do with Nikki Haley. And as I did with my successor, Linda Thomas Greenfield, I walked her through everything, and I said, look, you're not going to agree with my policies, but let me tell you about the countries that will put roadblocks. It was mainly, I was so happy that Biden followed the China policies as far as making certain that we use all of our tools in our toolbox for deterrence. But so I speak to her, I'm helping the nominee, Michael Waltz, who I'm hoping that he gets his confirmation vote today or tomorrow because we need him there. You know, the UN's pretty much useless. And we need someone there that is going to stand strong for America.
That was it. Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
All right, I think Jeff's our last question.
Hello.
Oh, Jeff, okay.
Hi, I'm Jeff Schrunsker. I'm on the advisory board for the center, so thank you for coming today and supporting this university and the center, and thank you for fighting anti-Semitism.
Welcome.
So in the 1980s and before, we had the concept of mutually assured destruction for nuclear.
Mm-hmm.
Today, when I think about China potentially invading Taiwan, I think about the economic interdependence, and that today, I know the current administration is trying to move us away from that, but there's a level of economic interdependence that it would seem would be mutually assured economic destruction if China went into Taiwan. So I'm curious your thoughts about that and the reality of that type of situation actually happening. Floor is yours.
I say, so let me just break that down a minute.
Yep.
So what we have to be careful is when we speak with Taiwan and we're talking about, for example, TSMC, so that is the chip manufacturing industry that's in Arizona. That is the chip that we all have to have right now in order to use any of your devices, right? What we don't want to do is you don't want to just aggravate China. That's not what we're trying to do, is to aggravate the CCP.
Right. Chinese
people are great, very smart. What you want to do is you want to speak sense, and you want to make certain that you don't want to aggravate them. The last thing we want to do is to aggravate them. But what we do want to do is to provide deterrence. But what I really like about this administration is they are separating defense security from economic. And I think they've walked a fine line and done a phenomenal job with that. Because if I was China, any other time, I would kind of be questioning, why are we investing in TSMC, right? Why are we investing in drone manufacturing Or why is Taiwan investing in the United States in different manufacturing areas? Well, first of all, that's to offset tariffs. But second of all, you want that in order to help economically. So it's really, I'm amazed at how Pete Hegseth has put himself separately than the Economic Council. And that's because President Trump has said, we are not agitating China. But let me ask you something. Did you just watch the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meet? Did you see the kumbaya moment?
Unfortunately, I
between
did.
Putin?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, these are grown men, you all, holding hands. Come on. They just need to see some little hearts emojis floating around. They're not even friends. They're not even friends. Why did they do that? To send a message to the U.S. Did we bite on it? No. Because we know what India's doing. We know that Modi is upset with us because we're upset with him. I mean, he is purchasing on the secondary market oil. And do you know how that oil is transported from Russia? This even makes it worse. They're using shadow fleets. So not only are they purchasing secondary market, which means they're getting it at a really good deal in order to help Russia financially, it's coming in on unmarked vessels. So here they are, holding hands, chit-chatting, us knowing that India is part of the Quad, right? They're part of the Quad, which is the group that in the Indo-Pacific that is really set for economic viability. And China's not in that. So then you look at that meeting, and you look at the fact that when you finish any sort of a meeting or a conference, like you do the G7, the G77, the G20, you write a communique. So the host country writes, it's called a communique, it's what has been decided. Did you see where they did not mention Russia, Ukraine, but they did other conflicts?
No, that's not surprising.
But I'm just saying, that was directed at us.
Right.
But these countries don't even like each other. Come on.
Right.
I mean, I don't even understand how China and India could be in the same room with the situation in Pakistan. Do you? I don't get it. So I read that, and then I'm looking at BRICS. I'm looking at this Brazil, Russia, Iran, India, all these 10 countries that have gotten together that are on the socioeconomic spectrum. Why have they gotten together? They have one country that they all think that they want to beat, and that is America. So I look at that and I think, we're not going to react, and we don't behave that way. But what we are going to be is we're going to be ready, and that is by showing strength, and that is by deterrence. And I think that showing strength is exactly what we did with the Operation Midnight Hammer. I think going into Israel, we gave them 60 days, right? That 61st day, we're like, buddy, you're in for it. And we showed them. Made the world a safer place. And nuclear is something that really is very troubling.
Right.
But I can assure you that Xi Jinping understands if that ever were to happen, he's finished.
Right.
And he doesn't have a lot of friends, by the way. I mean, he may think these tariffs that we have put on other countries, which we have a huge trade deficit, he may think that's helping him. At the end of the day, they're all looking to America. Because they know those countries, India understands, they understand who's purchasing, who they're exporting to, and who's buying their products. And we're going to keep those tariffs. As long as they're purchasing that secondary oil, we're not going to give in. Why would we want to give in to somebody purchasing on the secondary market, supporting Russia against Ukraine?
Right, so I guess my question was really more about I'm sorry I didn't phrase it clearly enough. If China decided to invade Taiwan or attempt to invade Taiwan, we now have a hot war. How strong is the threat of economic ruin for China? They're dependent upon us. They have billions or trillions in T-bill holdings, even though they've been decreasing them over time, right? when I think about it as the equivalent of the US and USSR with nuclear weapons. If they're going to go in there, we're going in, and a whole lot of stuff's just going to bottom out. And China's still a house of cards where they have 7 billion people or something, but was it 8 billion live in absolute abject poverty that are just ready to rise up, and that's their ultimate fear. So how strong is that threat? I mean, I guess the real question is how strong is the threat of China actually going into Taiwan, given that economic situation?
Well, first of all, China's struggling.
Right.
With the housing market, I mean, that was a huge, I can't even imagine. Evergreen, when it went under, I mean, that's unbelievable. Their population is aging to the point that they're going to be selling more adult diapers than baby diapers. That's no joke. Their income per capita is pennies to the dollar. The only thing they have, let me tell you, when they count their military, when they count their ships, do you know what they count? They count the little float things too. So sure, we could count thousands of things if we counted every little vessel that floated. But what we have to do is we can never completely, in my opinion, divorce, decouple, whatever you want to call it, from China. And we won't, because we know the what they produce is what we need. And you know what? With their cobalt, I mean, they're sitting on lithium, cobalt, and nickel. And there are countries in Africa that have this. Why are we not? Well, I'm going to go back to Africa again.
Right.
Why are we not there? Nigeria. Why are we not there protecting those mines from the gangs, right? Because they're sitting on all of this rare earth minerals. So I think it's up to us to be prepared. I mean, as we have said to Taiwan, you have to be prepared yourself. They have to be prepared. And until then, I don't think any country is going to go in and just defend them unless we see them defending themselves. I mean, they're sitting on, to me, they're the ones with what makes the world continue every day.
Right.
So they just need, like I said, they need to understand democracy. But with China, the tariffs, President Trump has done a fine job on separating, like I said, defense from the economy. And I don't know how in the world they've done that, but it has been a delicate dance, and they've done it beautifully.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, well, let's thank Ambassador Kraft for this wonderful
Thank you.
thing. I've got a little
Thanks.
gift for you here.